Hey everybody, this is Tracy here with another edition of A View from Tracy's Point. And so yesterday I posted you guys the cross-examination, well actually the day 2 of Faith Rogers being on the witness stand, and that was from September 1st. And there was some, conversation about whether or not there was something entered into the record or the testimony about Deborah Canick asking Faith if she had actually been diagnosed with the HSV 2 or 1, whichever one she's claiming she has, in 2013. And so I did not see that in the cross-examination. I saw where she stated, or he asked her about a police report in December of 2017, and she said that that was not correct. And so there was a lot of discussion back and forth about that, and people felt that Judge Donnelly had deleted information from the court record. And so before I go any further, it is virtually impossible to delete anything from the court reporters. The report that I'm reading to you guys, it's virtually impossible to delete information. You can redact information, making, where they blank out the lines of information. But the machines that court reporters use, they're not typewriters or a laptop. It's actually some type of machine that records this information. And throughout the day, the court reporters could be giving the attorneys transcripts that they've done throughout the day, or they can give it to them at the end of the day. So for Donnelly to have said, okay, delete that information, that would have been something that would have had to have happened, if it's even possible to happen, on the back end, which would have been like days later. So, it's, first of all, this is a legal document, these transcripts. And so to delete information would be almost criminal, if it's not criminal, and could get any judge in a bunch of trouble if they were deleting information. And so that's why they have the redaction process. But when the attorneys get the documents, they're not redacted. They have all the information, because it's actually the transcripts that they use to file appeals. And so when they file appeals, they have to have access to what was actually said during court. Now, can a court reporter mishear something and type it incorrectly? I'm sure that is possible. But then when they give the information to the transcripts to the attorneys, and the attorneys read through it, then the attorneys have the opportunity to say, hey, that's not what I said, that's not what the witness said. And then they can go back and address any, inconsistencies. And then I'm sure they record the court documents like an audio recording, and then they can match that up to what the transcript has stated. So I didn't want to read the court. I was being lazy, okay? I didn't want to read it, because the testimony from August 31st, because I had already did a video on it, but because there is this controversy about this statement that was allegedly made by Deborah Canick during, I was told, cross-examination, but I went back and read through the transcript for the previous day where Faith first took the stand, and then I did come across something that may be what people are talking about this 2013. However, it doesn't mention the 2013. It doesn't mention a court filing or police filing. And then the sidebar that was had about this information has been redacted. So I still don't know what it said, but I'm going to go ahead and read the beginning of Faith's testimony when she first took the stand. But before we get into that, there was someone on the stand by the name of Christopher Davies. And so I think he had information regarding Faith. And so I'm going to go ahead and read his information as well. And so it opens up with Donnelly, and it says, anything before we bring the jury in. And Shahada, and you guys can tell I'm losing my voice, so I'm not going to be able to do my impersonations today. I got caught in the rain the other day. Excuse me, and it's catching up with me. So I'm losing my voice. So it says anything before the jury, we bring the jury in. Shahada, Christopher Davis, Donnelly. Any issues to raise? Shahada, sorry, no. Donnelly, what about from the defense? And then Scholar says, no, Your Honor. And then the witness enters. Donnelly, let's get the jury. The jury enters. The court deputy, you may be seated. Donnelly, call your next witness. Shahada, the government calls Christopher Davies. He's sworn in by the deputy. And then Donnelly, of course, gives her spiel about making sure that the microphone is on, talk clearly into the microphone so that the court reporter can hear, and that if you have questions, ask her, don't ask the lawyers. And what else did she say don't ask the lawyers, any questions, and to only answer the questions that the lawyer is asking. So Shahada begins, and she says, Your Honor, before I begin inquiring, I'd like to put a stipulation into the record and display it as well. Donnelly says, sure. Shahada, this is Government Exhibit 1002. The undersigned parties that Government's Exhibit 231 is an envelope addressed to Lydia C. Hills, Esquire, at the law office of Lydia C. Hills, PC, 300 Camden. Sorry about that. Lydia C. Hills, Esquire, at the law office of Lydia C. Hills, PC, 300 Cadman Plaza West, 12th floor, Brooklyn, New York, 11201, sent by United States Postal Service, certified mail with tracking number 7018-0680-001, 3304-2470. Government's Exhibit 920 consists of USPS records for the certified mailing for that tracking number, which indicates the certified mailing was delivered to 300 Cadman Plaza West, Brooklyn, New York, on November 26, 2018 at 1:18 p.m. by being left with an individual who electronically signed for the mailing. If called as a witness at trial, Nicole Harris would testify as follows. On November 26, 2018, Ms. Harris was employed by Regus, a company that rents office space to others. On November 26, 2018, Ms. Harris worked for Regus at a building located at 300 Cadman Plaza West, Brooklyn, New York, 11201, the building, and was stationed at the reception desk in the lobby of the building. The law office of Lydia C. Hills, PC, was a tenant of the building. Among Ms. Harris' duties while she worked at the building was signing for mailings and packaging mail to tenants in the building that required a signature, and thereafter ensuring their delivery to the intended recipient. The electronic signature contained in Government in Exhibit 920 for the mailing with USPS tracking number, and then they read out the number, is Ms. Harris's signature. As was Ms. Harris's regular practice following her receipt and signature for the mailing with the United States Postal Service tracking number, Ms. Harris caused the mailing to be provided to Ms. Lydia C. Hills. Ms. Harris did not open or alter the mailing. After receiving it, the stipulation is admissible at trial, signed by lawyers for both parties. Donnelly, okay. So Christopher Davis, called as a witness, having been first duly sworn, was examined and testified as following. Ms. Shahida, and guys, remember, I just have to give you this disclaimer. I'm not going to go back and forth, with who's talking at this point. So when a question is being asked, it is the prosecutor or the attorney. When it's being answered, it is the person on the witness stand. And if the person on the witness stand asks a question, then I'll let you know that that is who is asking the question. So, Miss Shahida, good morning. The person replies, good afternoon. Well, she said good afternoon, and then he said good afternoon. Are you currently employed? Yes, I am. Where do you work? The Department of Homeland Security Investigations out of New York. Is Homeland Security Investigations also known as HSI? That is correct. What is your title at HSI? A special agent. How long have you worked as special agent at HSI? Approximately 14 years now. What is your current assignment at HSI? A firearms coordinator. About how long have you been doing that? Approximately 2 years now. Prior to your assignment as a firearms coordinator, what, if any, squad did you work on prior to that? Prior to that, I was working in trafficking in persons unit for approximately 12 years. Is that in the New York office? That is correct, yes. I want to direct your attention to January 2019. Were you working in the trafficking in persons unit at that time? I was, yes. Were you assigned at that time to work on the investigation of Robert Kelly? Yes, I was. Directing your attention to February 14, 2019, did you collect certain evidence from an individual that day? Yes, I did. Showing the witness what is marked for identification as government's Exhibit 231 and witness only, please. Do you see that on your screen? Yes, I do. I'm also showing the government's Exhibit 231A. Do you see that? Yes, I do. Prior to your testimony here today, did you have an opportunity to review government's Exhibit 231 and 231A? Yes, I did. And do you recognize these items? Yes, I do. What are these items? These are the documents that I took into my possession that day. On February 14, 2019, that is correct, yes. Who did you collect these items from? Individual by the name of Lydia Agu. Is Lydia Agu also known as Lydia Hills? Yes, it is. Lydia Agu is her married name. Where did you collect these items from, Lydia Hills? An interview was conducted at the United States Attorney's Office for the Eastern District of New York here in Brooklyn. What did you do with these items after receiving them? We photographed them at the United States Attorney's Office, then we secured them in an evidence bag, then transported them to our office, our field office in New York. Did you do that yourself? Yes, I did. Your Honor, I move to admit Government's Exhibit 231 and 231A. Any objection? None. That's Canick saying he doesn't object. Donnelly, okay, that's in evidence. And then let me stick a pin here. I did a video on Lydia Hills Agu. She is Faith Rogers' attorney, or she was Faith Rogers' attorney until she found herself in some legal trouble, and she might be disbarred at this point. But in any event, I did do a video on her. Oh my God, probably back in 2019, if you guys want to go through the playlist that I have for these videos and find that basically there was something going on with her aunt, and the aunt, I believe, was accused of mortgage fraud or something the aunt was convicted of, and she had to turn over her home or something to that effect, sell her home. The Lydia woman got involved and did some dirty dealings. I can't remember exactly what it was, but it landed her in trouble, and then she herself was convicted in this whole scheme to defraud the government in terms of this restitution that the aunt owed. So back to this, Shahada continues, and she says, just showing you, starting with Government's Exhibit 231, do you see where it says certified mail? Yes. Is there a tracking number there? There is, below the barcode. Read that number, please. And then he reads the number. And then Shahida, may I approach for a moment, Your Honor? Donnelly, yes. Shahada, I just handed the Government's Exhibit 231 and 231A. Looking at those documents, do you see some writing on the envelope and various pages of the documents in green? Some numbers. Yes, I do. I see some numbers in green, also some dots, then some notes, it appears. When you collected Government's Exhibit 231 and 231A from Lydia Hills, was that numbering in green on those documents? No, it was not. Is that numbering related to processing other documents after receipt by HSI? It would probably most likely be from the NYPD, the New York City Police Department. Canic. I'm going to object if he doesn't know. Donnelly. Do you know which one it is, and speak into the microphone? Shahada. Can I clarify the question? I'm asking, are those numbers related to processing that was done after you collected the documents and took them to HSI? By me? No, it was not. Are you aware if there was at the time you collected the documents? Were you aware of any further processing that would be done by others? Yes, I was. The items were going to be sent over to the New York Police Department Forensics Laboratory. Donnelly, you didn't put those markings on there, and they weren't on there when you got it, right? That's correct, Your Honor. Shahada, no further questions. Donnelly, any cross-examination? Canic, 1 second, please. Then he came back and said none. Donnelly, thank you so much. You can step down. The witness was excused. Donnelly, who is your next witness? And then Shahada said the next witness is Faith. And so the deputy swears Faith in. Faith gets the lecture from Donnelly about speaking into the microphone that she gives everybody. And if you have questions, blah, blah, blah. And then Faith said, okay, Donnelly, go ahead. And then Shahada, thank you, Your Honor. Faith, called as a witness, having been first duly sworn, affirmed, was examined and testified as the following. Shahada, I'm showing you what is marked for identification as Government's Exhibit 79 for this witness only. Do you recognize this photograph? Yes. Who is this a photograph of? Me. I move to admit Government's Exhibit 79. Canic, no objection, but I'm having a difficult time hearing her. Donnelly, I don't think she said anything yet. Can you tap it one more time? Make sure you're speaking right into it. Go ahead. Shahada, you said this is a photograph of you. Is that correct? Correct. If there is no objection, move to admit it. Donnelly, yes. Shahada, may we publish it? Donnelly, yes. Shahada, I'm showing the witness only what is marked for identification, Government's Exhibit 79A. Is this the same photograph I just showed you with your first and last name underneath? Correct. And the government moves to admit Government's Exhibit 79A to the jury only. Canic, no objection. Donnelly, that's in evidence, jury only. Shahada, I'm showing you what is in evidence as Government's Exhibit 1. Do you recognize this person? Yes. Who do you recognize that to be? Robert Kelly. Have you met Robert Kelly in person? Yes. Do you see Robert Kelly in the courtroom here today? Yes. Can you point him out and identify him by an item of clothing he's wearing? The blue jacket. Donnelly, indicating the defendant. Shahada, when and where did you first meet the defendant? I first met him in San Antonio, Texas at the Tobin Center. What was going on at the Tobin Center that day? He was performing. Do you recall around when it was that you were at the Tobin Center? Around March 2017. How old were you then? 19. To your knowledge, how old was the defendant when you met him? 50. After meeting the defendant in March 2017 in San Antonio, did you thereafter begin traveling to see the defendant after that? Yes. When you saw the defendant, were there occasions when the defendant engaged in sexual contact with him? Yes. Around when did you first travel to see the defendant? Around May of 2017. Around when was the last time you traveled to see the defendant? Around February of 2018. At any point during the time that you communicated with and traveled to see the defendant, did he tell you he had herpes? He did not. At any point during your sexual interactions with the defendant, did he wear a condom? No. Did those sexual interactions include intercourse? Yes. During the course of time that you saw and communicated with the defendant, what, if any, different sides of the defendant did you see? I got to see a compassionate side of him, emotional side. He wasn't always bad. He wasn't always mean. Very normal, like sometimes I felt like I was conversing with somebody I went to school with my age. What other sides did you see of him? I also saw him, there were times where he would flip, just extremely calm, and then go to like being super sexually hyper, just different phases, just depending on how he was feeling, in the moods he was in. Stepping back for a moment, how old are you? 24 years old. Where did you grow up? San Antonio, Texas. How far did you go in school? I finished high school and I have some college experience, education. How long were you enrolled in college? About a year. Why did you leave college? I just decided school wasn't for me. Do you have any siblings? I do. How many siblings do you have? 6. Are some of those half siblings? Yes, I have 5 half siblings and 1 full-blooded little sister. What do your parents do? My mom owns daycares. My dad is a supervisor for the school district as well as a pastor. Directing your attention to March 2017. How old were you again at that time? 19 years old. You testified that in March 2017 you attended a concert. Is that correct? Correct. Whose concert did you attend? R. Kelly. Again, where did that concert take place? San Antonio, Texas, at the Tobin Center. Showing the witness only Government's Exhibit 508. Do you recognize this? I do. What is this? The Tobin Center. I move to admit Government's Exhibit 508. Canic, no objection. Donnelly, it's in. You can publish it. Shahada. Is the Tobin Center a theater venue? Yes. Who, if anyone, did you attend the R. Kelly concert at the Tobin Center with? I went with my older sister. Approximately how old was your older sister at the time? Around 36 years old. Was this your half-sister? Yes. How did you end up attending the R. Kelly concert with your older sister? She called me one day and she just said that she had tickets. He was in town and she had no one to go with, if I would go with her. Did you agree to go? I did. Were you an R. Kelly fan at the time? I was not. How about your sister? Was she a fan? She was. Where did you sit for the concert at the venue? We were seated in some seats like far away from the stage. Then once we got there, I decided we should move closer because we couldn't see. So we moved closer. Okay, what kind of concert y'all was at where y'all could just move seats? I mean, aren't concert seats typically assigned seating? The seat number is on your ticket. But anyway, where did you end up sitting when you moved closer? We were like in the middle section, not too close to the stage, but we weren't that far. Did you stay for the whole concert? We did. Did you enjoy the concert? We did. What, if anything, happened at the end of the concert? Towards the end of the concert, 2 young ladies approached me and my sister with wristbands in their hand, and they had let me know he was having an after party backstage. Just bring me and my sister, no one else. Make sure we show them our wristbands. When you say he was having an after party, who is the he? R. Kelly. What, if anything, were the 2 individuals that approached you wearing? Shirts with his face on it, and on the back it says staff. Again, his face being the... R. Kelly's correct. What, if anything, did they give you a wristband? What, if anything, did you do after getting a wristband from these individuals? After we got the wristbands, the concert was about to be over. So I went to go get my car out of valet, and my sister, she went ahead and went backstage. Why did you go get your car out of valet? Because valet was going to be closing. About how long did it take you to get your car out of the valet? About an hour. Where did you go after about an hour? After I returned back to the front door of the venue, I showed them my wristband and they showed me backstage. Where were you taken backstage? So we were taken back to like a dressing room part, a really big dressing room. Did you go inside? We did. What was the atmosphere in the dressing room when you got there? When we got there, it was mainly all women. There was a few men in the room. The men that were in the room, they were his staff. They had on staff shirts with his face on it as well. And I would say probably like maybe 30 women in there. Some of them I saw from the concert because they were sitting on stage on the couch. And some I had never seen before. Was your sister there? Correct. Was music playing? There was music playing. Was there any alcohol being served? Yes, Ciroc was being served. Anyone check your ID before you went to the dressing room? No. When you first got to the dressing room, was the defendant there? No, he was not. At some point while you were in the dressing room, did the defendant show up? He did. What happened at that point? When he came in, he kind of just stood there at first, and everybody, all the women in the room got excited. They all ran up to him. They all had their phones out, ready to record. Right away, he said, no phones. Everybody put their phones away. And after that, they all just formed a line to give him a hug. Did you get in the line? I did not. What about your sister? Did she get in the line? She did. What, if anything, did you do while your sister was in line to meet the defendant? After my sister was in line, I was waiting for her to come back, holding her spot for her. Did your sister end up meeting the defendant? She did. What, if anything, did you and your sister do after she stood in line and met the defendant? After she stood in line, we continued to be off to ourselves. We were standing, dancing to the music, and he came towards me. When you say he, who are you referring to? R. Kelly. And what happened next? He came towards me and my sister where we were sitting, and there was a chair behind me. He sat behind the chair. I stopped dancing when he sat in the chair. He said, you don't have to stop now. How, if at all, did you respond? I looked at him. I laughed it off. Right away, he smiled back, quick hi, and shortly after, he handed me a piece of paper with his phone number. Who handed you the piece of paper? R. Kelly. What, if anything, did he say to you when he handed you the piece of paper? He told me to grab his hand. When I grabbed his hand, there was a piece of paper with his phone number on it. And he was like, when I gave you the paper, don't make a big deal about it or tell anybody I gave it to you. He told me to text him the numbers and a picture of myself so he knew it was me. I just nodded and said, okay. At some point after you received the piece of paper from the defendant, did you look at it? Yes, later that night. What was on the piece of paper? 2 of his phone numbers. You testified earlier that you ultimately saw the defendant. After meeting the defendant at this concert, you ultimately saw him on various occasions until about February 2018, correct? Correct. During that course of time, did the defendant provide you with additional phone numbers for him in addition to the 2 of you got that evening at the concert? Yes. I'm showing the witness only what is marked for identification as Government's Exhibit 206A. This is a 2-page document. I'm going to show you the first page, then the second page. Do you recognize these pages? Yes. Generally speaking, what are they? His phone numbers on my cell phone. Are these photographs of the defendant's phone numbers in your cell phone? Correct. I move to admit Government's Exhibit 206A. Canick, no objection. Donnelly, that's an evidence. Shahada, may we publish it? Donnelly, yes. Okay, looking first at the first 206A, are there 4 numbers saved there? Yes. And what is it saved under? Don't reply ×3. Did you always have the defendant's number saved in your phone under don't reply ×3? No. What did you previously have the number saved under in your phone? Daddy, I'm showing the second page of Government's Exhibit 206A. Is there one number here under a name? Don't reply. Yes. Whose phone number is that? R. Kelly. When you initially saved this phone number in your phone, did you have it under Don't Reply? No. Do you recall what you had saved under? Daddy. Going back to when the defendant handed you a piece of paper in the dressing room with his phone numbers on it, what, if anything, happened after the defendant handed you the piece of paper? Well, after he handed me the piece of paper, he had invited me and my sister back to his room for food. My sister wanted a picture as well, so we ended up going to his dressing room. And when you say we ended up going to his dressing room, who are you referring to? My sister and I. Who took you? Withdrawn. Was that a separate dressing room than where you had been with the other people initially backstage? Yes, it was his personal dressing room we were going to. Who took you there? R. Kelly and his staff. Once you got that second dressing room, was anyone else there? No. What happened once you got to that second dressing room? When we got to the dressing room, it was just him, me, and my sister. We were sitting down. The first thing he did was ask me if I sing, if I model, if I acted, I danced, anything I was into, and I let him know at the time, no, just school, that's it. He had said he asked if we were sisters. We said yes. He asked who was older, things like that. He asked if she sung or she did anything. She told him she sung. The conversation, it wasn't that long. He was informing us about some new stuff he was working on, showing pictures of Rihanna wearing his t-shirt with his face on it. I guess just giving me updates of what was going on at the time. He played some new tracks from his phone. We got to hear new music. It was a friendly conversation. You said you were telling him you were in school, correct? Yes. Were you in school at the time? Yes. What were you studying at the time? Generally studying. I was enrolled in UTSA. Did he ask you questions about your schooling? No. While you were up in that second dressing room, did you take any photos? Yes. Can you tell the jury about that? We ended up taking a photo with him, my sister, R. Kelly, and I at the end of the night. I'm showing you what is marked for identification as Government's Exhibit 209. Do you recognize this photo? Yes. What do you recognize this photo to be? Me, R. Kelly, and my sister. And is that in that second dressing room you've testified about that you went to with the defendant, you and your sister? Yes. I move to admit Government's Exhibit 209. Canick, no objection. Donnelly, okay, that's in evidence. Donnelly, you can publish. Shahada, thank you. Now, while you were in the dressing room, in that second dressing room with the defendant and your sister that evening, what, if anything, did the defendant say to you about keeping in touch? He just reminded me to send him a picture of myself and my name so he wouldn't forget it. Now, at some point, did you leave the Tobin Center? Yes. And where did you go after you left? I dropped my sister off, then I went home. And who, if anyone, were you living with at the time? My parents. And was there anyone else living in that household other than your parents? My younger sister. And how old was she at the time? She was 14. Now, you said you drove your older sister to her house. Is that right? Yes. And what, if anything, did you tell your older sister about your interactions with the defendant that evening? When we got in the car, I told her that he had gave me his phone number, and right away she was super excited. She was like, out of all the girls in there, like, he looked at you. You told me like I should feel special. She told me like I should feel special. She was really more excited than I was. And again, she was an R. Kelly fan. Is that right? Yes. Now, do you recall around what time you got home that night? I got home around like 1:45, 2 o'clock a.m. almost. So early morning hours after the concert. Yes. And what, if anything, did you do when you got home? I had texted him my name and a picture, a selfie of myself. And when you say him, who are you referring to? R. Kelly. And what kind of, you said you texted him a selfie. Yes. What kind of selfie did you text him? It was a picture of me smiling, a smiling picture of your face. It was like full body. You could see my outfit, my face, everything. Okay, and is that a picture that you already had or one that you took for that purpose? No, it was a picture I already had. What kind of phone did you have at the time? A iPhone. An Apple iPhone? Yes. Is there any other kind of iPhone? Y'all thought Apple made the iPhone. I mean, I'm an Android user, but I thought Apple was the only one that made iPhones. And then also, let's start right here. For somebody who wasn't interested in him, she sure was quick, couldn't wait to get home to send that picture, right? And to text him and see what was going on. And I mean, that's not a bad thing, because technically you meet a celebrity, a superstar, and they are interested in you. You had an opportunity to talk with him. He seemed like a nice person. So I'm not going to say it was weird that she texted him, but for somebody who claimed she wasn't interested, she couldn't wait to get in that house and send that text message at 2 o'clock in the morning. Because what y'all think was on that man's mind at 2 o'clock in the morning? Like, she could have waited to the, in the daytime when he might have been, at lunch or something to send that text message. But we know what this is about to lead to. I ain't even got to read on to find out what happened next. But anyway, I'm just joking. And then also I found it interesting that she said that he asked those questions about, was she a singer? Was she a dancer? Was she a model? Now, that could be viewed two ways. One way, it could be viewed that every woman that he meets has a story about being a singer, a model, a dancer, and entertainment, right? Somebody looking for a come up who hopes that he can help them get into the industry. And then she already said that the sister was a singer. The sister was interested in singing, but of course the sister was 36 years old. So, and then I don't even know, would a 36-year-old be calling up her 19-year-old sister to go to a concert? Like, the sister had to really been desperate for somebody to go to this concert with her. Then on the flip side, I guess what the prosecution is trying to lead to is that he's only interested in talking to people who are singers, models, dancers, that type of thing, because that's how he lured people into his web of deceit that they're trying to allege. So Faith's testimony kind of goes against that, because she said she wasn't any of those things, and then that seemed to make him more interested. Like, okay, I ain't got to deal with no BS, with nobody trying to use me to come up. Okay, so let's continue on. So then Shahada says, all right, at some point after you sent the selfie with your name to the defendant, at some point did you get a response from the defendant? Yes, I did. And when did you first notice the response? When I had woke up. And what do you remember about that? He was very friendly. He said he remembered me, said I was pretty, complimented me, and he had invited me to come where he was at in San Antonio. And do you remember anything about where he lived where he invited you in San Antonio? He said he was going to a studio in San Antonio. And did you take him up on that invitation? No. Now, following those initial texts, was that by text message, by the way? Yes. And following those initial text messages you exchanged with the defendant, what, if any, types of communication did you have with the defendant after that? After that, we continued with texting, then it moved to phone calls, and then shortly after phone calls, we started FaceTiming. And the text messages, did that include iMessages? Yes. Now, you mentioned phone calls and FaceTime. Is that right? Yes. What is FaceTime? FaceTime is video chatting. Now, do you recall the substance of any of those initial communications that you had with the defendant in the days after the concert? The first initial conversations were very warm. He seemed really down to earth. Like, that's what surprised me. He seemed really down to earth. He was just telling me about himself, saying how he likes to spend his time, enjoy his time. In the beginning, he did ask a few questions about me, what I like to do, what I was into, if I had a boyfriend, things like that, basic questions. Now, did you end up seeing the defendant again at all in San Antonio? I did not. Now, in those initial communications you had with the defendant by phone, how, if at all, did the defendant refer to himself on the phone calls? He refers to himself as Daddy. And about how soon after you had met him did he do that? Right away, probably like the next day. But he was saying it through text. It wasn't me hearing him call himself that. At some point, did the defendant say to you anything about he wanted you to call him? Yes, he would like to be referred to as Daddy. And initially, did you do that? No. And what happened when you didn't do that? Well, there was a time when I did not refer to him as Daddy, and he had called me and he said, "Hey, baby." And I said, "Hey." He said, "Let's try this again." And he hung up the phone. And then what happened? And then when he called again, he said, "Hey, baby." I said, "Hey, Daddy." He said, "Good girl." And after that happened, did you call the defendant Daddy? I did. Now, in those initial communications with the defendant by phone, did he compliment you? Yes. What kinds of things did he say to you? I was beautiful. I was pretty. Things a girl wants to hear, of course. And how did that make you feel? Nice. It made me feel like I was pretty. After the defendant left San Antonio, about how often were you communicating with him? After he left San Antonio, the communication, it was like I heard from him every other day, and then maybe like a week later, it started turning into every day, and then we moved to phone, FaceTime. That's when it became more consistently. When, if at all, did the defendant tell you he loved you? The first week. After you had first met him? Yes. And how many times had you met him in person at that point? Once. How, if at all, did you respond? I said, "Really?" I didn't say I love you back right away at all. Later on, towards our relationship further in, I did, but not right away. In your communication with the defendant, how, if at all, did the topic of your traveling to see him come up? He had informed me that he was on tour right now, or excuse me, at the time, he was on tour, so he was just saying his schedule was kind of crazy, but whenever I wanted to come see him, I could. And he just said that we could arrange the days or just let him know when I wanted to come hang out, but that it would be fun. I would get to see, how it is, how he is on tour, things like that. And did he say anything to you about who you should contact to set that up? Yes. He told me that his assistant, Diana, he would give me her phone number and I would just text her and let her know when I wanted to come and she would arrange it. And at some point, did you contact Diana? Yes, I did. Do you recall around when that was? That was around April of 2017, I believe. And why did you contact Diana? I had spoke with R. Kelly about coming to a show, so I had messaged her. And where in April, directing your attention to April 2017, where were you planning to travel to see the defendant? I was supposed to go to Chicago. And you testified you contacted Diana, is that right? Yes. And did she make any arrangements for you? She did. And, by the way, how did you contact Diana? In what manner? We were texting. I'm showing the witness only what's been marked for identification as Government's Exhibit 206B. Do you recognize this? My screen is blank. Court deputy. Sorry. Shahada. Do you see anything on your screen now? Yes. Do you recognize Government's Exhibit 206B? Yes. And what is that? A photo of a screenshot of Diana's contact in my phone. One moment. And so, this is a screenshot of the number you had saved for Diana on your phone. Correct. Move to admit Government's Exhibit 206B. Canic, no objection. Donnelly, okay, it's in evidence. Shahada. And if we could publish it to the jury only, please. And this number that begins with area code 248, was that the number you used to communicate with Diana? Yes. Now, did you end up traveling to see the defendant in April 2017? I did not. And why not? I was sent the wrong plane ticket. And when you say you were sent the wrong plane ticket, what do you mean? And without referring to, I was sent someone else's plane ticket. How, if at all, did you react after? Sorry, do you recall how you were sent the wrong ticket, itinerary, or ticket? Dinah has sent me the wrong plane ticket. Was that by email? Through text? No, excuse me, through email. And how, if at all, did you react after receiving email from the itinerary or ticket in someone else's name? I had informed Diana she sent me the wrong plane ticket. She said she would fix it. And I had let Mr. Kelly know that I had been sent somebody else's plane ticket. Were you upset about that? A little, like weirded out. I'm showing the witness only what's been marked for identification as Government's Exhibit 234B. Do you recognize this exhibit? Yes. And is this an email you received from Diana Copeland on April 20th, 2017? Yes. And does the subject line indicate flight reservation for a date in April from Atlanta to MDW with or of a female's name listed? Yes. And is this the flight ticket or itinerary that you received that you just testified about receiving from Diana? Yes. I move to admit Government's Exhibit 234B, and for the jury only. Mr. Canick, no objection. Donnelly, okay, it's in evidence. Shahida, and may we publish it to the jury, please? Donnelly, yes. Okay, and the name that the ticket that was sent to you by Diana, is that where I'm pointing my finger towards the end of the subject line? Canick, the screen is blank. Shahada, sorry. Shahada, do you see where I'm pointing? Yes. Without saying the name, is that the name the ticket was sent to you? Yes. Now, I think you testified that you received that ticket in another woman's name. You were weirded out. Is that right? Yes. And how, if at all, did you express how you felt to the defendant about getting that email? I had spoken with Mr. Kelly on the phone, and I just, in so many words, I let him know, like, I didn't really like that. I felt like that was kind of off if this was our first meeting up, and right away he told me, he kind of like laughed at me that anybody he has around him, that they're his friends. He always has friends around him, and that I shouldn't be upset about a friend. Basically, that this is who he is, a part of his lifestyle, that a lot of people hang around him and they want to be in contact with him, and that if I wanted to be around him, I can't be insecure or worried about things that don't have anything to do with me. Now, for me, that probably would have been the end of the conversation. He's letting you know he has multiple women in his life. And if that's something you didn't want to be a part of, then this would have been the perfect time to bow out gracefully. So then Shahada picks up and says, and did you continue to communicate with the defendant after that? Yes. When, if ever, did the topic of traveling to see the defendant come up again? It came up again next month. And where were you planning to travel to see the defendant at that time? This time I was planning to go to New York. And who brought up the topic of planning to see him again or traveling to see him again? He did. And you testified you were planning to travel to New York, is that right? Yes. What, if anything, did the defendant say to you about what was going on in New York at the time you were planning to be? He had, and she cut the question off. And then Faith cut the prosecutor off, and then she cut in and said, he had informed me that he was having a show in New York and that he would like for me to come, hang out. It was going to be fun, so I said yes. Now, after you and the defendant talked about traveling to the show in New York, who, if anyone, did you contact after that? After we discussed the dates, I contacted Diana to arrange my travel. And did Diana arrange for you to fly to New York to see the defendant? Yes, she did. And did you, in fact, travel to New York? Yes, I did. And how did you communicate with Diana regarding that first trip to New York? We was texting. I'm showing the witness only what's been marked for identification as Government's Exhibit 208A, and this is a 3-page document. Can you see this document on your screen? Yes. And I'm starting with showing you the first page, second page, and the third page. Do you recognize Government's Exhibit 208A? Yes. And generally speaking, what is contained within Government's Exhibit 208A? Text messages between Diana and I. And are these text messages specifically related to your trip to New York? Yes. And I move to admit Government's Exhibit 208A. Canick, no objection. Donnelly, that's in evidence. Now, around when was it that you were traveling to New York to see the defendant? May 18th. Of what year? 2017. And how old were you then? 19. Had you ever been to New York before? No. Had you ever been on a plane before? Once before. Who, if anyone, paid for your flight to New York? R. Kelly paid for my flight. And did you have a direct or connecting flight to New York? It was a connecting flight. And where did it connect through? Nashville. And who, if anyone, did you communicate with on your way to New York? Diana and R. Kelly. And why were you communicating with Diana while you were on your way? He told me to let her know every time I stopped and when I landed. Let her know basically every time I stop or get somewhere so she can be aware. And I don't think that that's odd, because I asked my daughter, like, when she has layovers in different places or stops in different places, I'm like, let me know when you get to such and such place. Let me know when you get to such and such place. Let me know when you land. Let me know when you've been picked up from the airport. I think that those are normal questions that people ask. Okay, so then Shahada say, when you say he, who are you referring to? She says R. Kelly. Now, looking at Government's Exhibit 208A, the text, are these texts again with Diana? Yes. And the texts in green on the first page are those texts that you sent to Diana? Yes. And the first one, what does that say? Just landed in Nashville. And moving down to the second text in green, what is it that you wrote to Diana there? Do you have the plan for when I arrived? And where were you when you sent that text? I was in Nashville. On that layover? Yes. Prior to getting to New York, did you know precisely what the plan was? No. All right. And then there's another text in green. Is that from you to Diana again that says, my flight is about to land? Yes. And it says, that was not delivered. Do you see that? Yes. Do you recall where you were when you sent that? Landing on the plane. All right. Did you then at some point receive a response from Diana? Yes. And where did she tell you to go once you landed? Hilton, Long Island. And is that in this message here? Hilton, Long Island, Huntington, 598 Broad Hollow Road, Melville, New York, 11747? Yes. And what else did she inform you of in that text message? A room is under my name at the hotel for 2 nights. And was that the Hilton for 2 nights? Yes. Now, after you arrived at the airport, how did you get to the hotel? Uber. And what, if anything, happened when you got to your hotel? Once I arrived at the hotel, there was an issue with the getting me in the hotel room with whoever's name it was up under. And I'm showing you page 2 of Government's Exhibit 208A. What did you do after you had an issue checking in at the hotel? Texted Diana. And again, on page 2, are the texts in green the text from you to Diana? Yes. And the text in gray from Diana to you? Yes. And who did she tell you the name your room was under? Hers. And what was her full name? Diana Copeland. Did you ultimately check into the room? Yes. And after you checked in, what, if anything, did you ask Diana? I asked her if I needed to get ready for anything. Again, at that point, did you know what the plan was for once you arrived? No, I just knew he had a concert. And did Diana respond to you? Yes. What did she let you know? That they were not there yet and that the show is starting at 8 o'clock. And did she let you know where the venue for the show was? Yes, she did. And what was the venue for the show? The theater at Westbury, 96 Brush Hollow Road, Westbury, New York. And is that indicated here in the text message? Correct. Towards the middle of page 3. And is it 960 Brush Hollow Road? Correct. In Westbury, New York. Correct. Do you ultimately go to that venue? Yes. And how did you get there? Uber. And who got you the Uber to go to the venue? Diana. I'm showing the witness only what's been marked for identification as Government's Exhibit 516. Do you recognize this photograph? Yes. What do you recognize it to be? The theater at Westbury. And is that the venue you went to that night to see the defendant's show? Yes. I move to admit Government's Exhibit 516. Canic, no objection. Donnelly, that's in evidence. Shahada, and may we publish it? Donnelly, okay. Now, where did you go once you got to the theater at Westbury? Well, once I arrived, I went up to the will call box to meet Diana. And did you, in fact, meet with Diana there? Yes. I'm showing you Government's Exhibit 36, which is in evidence. Do you recognize this person? Yes. Who is it? Diana Copeland. And is that who you met at will call that day? Yes. And is that who you had been communicating with, making your arrangements to New York and while in New York? Yes. Now, once you met Diana at the will call area, what happened? Once I met Diana at will call, she came to get me and she walked me backstage. Where did she take you? To his dressing room. Whose dressing room? R. Kelly's dressing room. And what happened when you got to the dressing room? When I got to the dressing room, I was just waiting for a little bit, not long. And what happened? He came in after getting a haircut. He was like full of energy. He was like, stand up, turn around. He's like, you look so pretty. You look amazing. Complimenting me. I said, thank you. There was like a brief pause and he's like, give me a kiss. So I kind of like reached in for a peck, and when I pecked back, he like jerked his head back at me. He looked at me. He was like, you're not doing it right. And he grabbed my face and he gave me a tongue kiss, like a really big tongue kiss. And it was just kind of awkward. It was like a slight pause and he's like, I'm going to have to teach you how to kiss. And the he you are referring to there, is that the defendant? Yes. After this slightly awkward kiss situation, what happened? Shortly after that, Diana came back and told him that it was almost time to get ready, so she had came back and escorted me to where I was going to be seated. Where did she escort you to? The front, like about the second row, close to stage. And was there anyone else in that row with you? Just security. And when you say just security, where were they in relation to you? So if I'm sitting right here, security is about on that last chair over there. They were still far away. Did you watch the concert? I did. And how, if at all, did the defendant engage with you during the concert? There was a few times he was like singing directly at me, making eye contact. That was one. He was singing and he pointed. He was interacting with me a lot, actually, on the stage. And how did that make you feel? I was flattered at the time. What, if anything, happened after the concert ended? After the concert ended, Diana, she came up to me and she let me know that he was going backstage to the after party and that she would call me an Uber to take me back to the hotel. And did she call you an Uber? She did. So did you go to the after party that night? I did not. And what happened after Diana called you an Uber? There was some type of complication. I don't know what happened, but I ended up just calling myself one and getting it. And where did you go once you called yourself an Uber? Returning back to the hotel. What did you do when you got back to the hotel? I showered and went to sleep. Do you recall what you wore to sleep that night? I had like loose shorts on, pajama shorts, and an oversized t-shirt. Until about what time did you sleep that night? From about like 12 in the morning until about 6 o'clock in the morning. What happened at 6 o'clock a.m.? I received a phone call. He told me he was about to come up. And then like a couple of seconds later, he said, knock, knock, a heavy knock on my door. And what happened after that? I opened the door for him. He comes in. Let me stop you for a moment. When you say he and him, who are you referring to? R. Kelly. All right, continue. R. Kelly comes in the door. He opens the door and he looks at me. He's like, why you got them pajamas on? He comes in, the AC was on about like 70. He turns it all the way up to 80 something. He says he can't have the heat. The air on him. He comes in, he asked me to turn on ESPN on the sports channel for him. And there was a chair. He throws his stuff on the chair and he strips down from waist down. Only waist down he strips down. And he sits down and he's kind of just pausing for a moment. And he asked me again why I had those clothes on. He told me to take them off. I didn't right away, but eventually I ended up taking my clothes off and I was in a bra and panties. I wasn't nude. And he asked me he said, come rub on daddy. And he's sitting there with his legs open, but I go to his shoulders and I start massaging his shoulders. And as I'm massaging his shoulder, he takes my wrist, and he puts it on his penis. And he says, no, right here, rub right here. And he rubs the motion back and forth. And right away, I let him know, because I was touching him, that I wasn't ready for sex. That wasn't something I was ready for. And he says, well, I'm at my best when I'm wanted. Okay, and when the defendant said to you, I'm at my best when I'm wanted, what did you take that to mean at that point? I understood that he was implying that it would be better when I was comfortable, but that he had understood what I was saying. Meaning he understood that you weren't ready for sex? Yes. Now, just to back up for a moment, I think you testified that when he came in, he had a bag with him. Is that right? Yes. What kind of bag? He had a Gucci backpack on it a Gucci backpack. There was like patchwork, like a UFO on it. And are you describing a line that Gucci had at the time? Yes. Now, when you testified that the defendant came in and at some point stripped down from the waist. Is that correct? Correct. Where in the room did that happen, if you recall? There was a chair and the room was not that big. He was just closer to the chair. We weren't on the bed. He was standing up. And when you say he stripped down, what do you mean by that? He took off his pants. He took off his underwear. The only thing he had on was just a jacket, no shoes, no underwear, nothing. And what part of his body was exposed? His penis. And you testified that he said to you, come rub on daddy. Is that right? Correct. And what, if anything, did you do after he said that? After he asked me to come rub on daddy, I started massaging his shoulders, his upper body. Okay, now girl, you said he had a jacket on. So what type of jacket was it? Like, I'm trying to picture him standing there with no bottoms on, but the jacket and stuff still on. Kind of weird, but anyway. And how did he react to that? He moved my hand on his penis and told me to rub there. Did you want to rub there at that time? No. Donnelly, Miss Shahida, if this is a good time, we might as well take our afternoon break. Sure, yes. All right, folks, we are going to take our break for this afternoon. Please do not talk about the case at all. I will see you in a few minutes. Clerk, all rise. Donnelly, all right, everybody can have a seat. The witness can step out. We will see you in about 10 minutes. Anything before we break? Mr. Scholar, no, Your Honor. Donnelly, okay, so I will see you in about 10 minutes. Court is in recess. In open court, jury not present, parties present. The clerk, all rise. Donnelly, everybody can have a seat. All right. Let's get the witness, please. Shahada, Judge, there's just one thing I'd like to do before the witness comes in. Sure. Which is just enter into evidence some business cards pursuant to Donnelly. Do you have to do this in front of the jury? I do not care, but yeah, I think I probably should. Yes. Donnelly, makes sense. All right. So why don't we get the witness you can do it while she is there. We have got to wait for, and then Nicole Blank Becker, they're going to the restroom actually. Donnelly, okay, might as well get it started. Witness enters the courtroom. We will have to wait for Mr. Scholar. Canick, I think I'll send him a text. Donnelly, that would be nice. Do you think it is okay to get started? Canick, yes, Your Honor. Donnelly, okay. Canick, he's just working with the investigator. Donnelly, completely fine. Let's get the jury, please. Then the clerk, all rise. You may be seated. Donnelly, all right, everybody. We are ready to continue. I think Ms. Shahada wants to put something in evidence before we resume the direct testimony of this witness. Ms. Shahada, yes, Your Honor, thank you. At this point, the government would like to move to admit Government Exhibits 945A and 945B, pursuant as certified business records of NRG Recording Studios, and the business records certification has been marked as Government Exhibit 945C. In addition, we move to admit Government Exhibits 946A, B, C, and D, also as certified business records from NRG Recording Studios. The business records certificate for that is Government Exhibit 946E. Donnelly, have you had a chance to look at them? Referring to counsel. Canick, I don't think so. Shahada, they were provided. Donnelly, well, is it okay? Canick, no objection, Your Honor. Donnelly, okay, those are in evidence. Then Shahada continues her questioning. All right, now, before our break, you were testifying about certain events that occurred the morning after you attended the defendant's show at the theater at Westbury, correct? Correct. And you were testifying about events that occurred in your room, in your hotel room, correct? Correct. Now, I think you testified before the break that after the defendant entered your room, he stripped from the waist down and had his penis exposed. Is that right? Correct. And you testified he asked you to rub on daddy. Correct. And you went and was that when he was exposed from the waist down already? Correct. And after that, you went and gave him a massage on his shoulders. Correct. And I think you testified it was at that point that he took your hand, grabbed your hand, and moved it towards his penis. Yes. And what did he do with your hand at that point? He moved my hand to his, and I'm going to start saying member here, to his member and instructed me, no, rub here. Now, you testified before the break that at some point you told him you weren't ready for sex. Is that correct? Correct. And at what point was that you said that? Once my hand was on his private area. And how did he react? He said that he was at his best when he was wanted. And again, before the break, you testified. What did you understand? What at that point did you understand that to mean? I understood that we had a mutual agreement on I wasn't ready for sex and he was at his best when he was wanted. Okay, now, while you were in the room that day, you testified before the break that the defendant made a comment about what you were wearing. Is that right? Yes. And did the topic of your clothes come up again? Yes. Can you tell the jury about that? When he first came in, he made a comment about why I had on those granny pajamas. And when he had sat down in the chair after stripping, he instructed me again, take off your clothes. I paused for a moment and then after that, I stripped my shirt and shorts off and I had on a bra and underwear. Now, after withdrawn, when the defendant put your hand on his member, where in the room were you? We were by a chair in a corner of the room. And at some point, did the defendant direct you to move anywhere else? He told me to go get on the bed. And what happened then? He instructed me to get on the bed on my back, like on all fours, and he just started rubbing on me. I had my bra and underwear on, so he was like rubbing on me, not caressing, but it was more like a texture type of rub feel. He worked his way down from my back all the way down to my vaginal, and he began to stick his fingers in me. He wasn't like, excuse me, he wasn't fingering me. It was like a poke, like poking my vagina. And his rubs were, he would do this like a texture rub on my buttocks and my vagina. And he liked, okay, wait a minute. I am so confused right now because she said she was on her back like on all fours. That makes zero sense to me. Like I am not getting a visual here. But anyway, she went on and said, and he like literally like spread me open, like in between, and like it was like a pat after, like it was done. And while you were just testifying, you made a movement with your hand. I think you put one hand over the other and made a movement back and forth. Is that right? Yes. And is that what it felt like the defendant was doing to you? Okay, she was describing what he was doing because I was hella confused at that point. So yes. And while he was doing these things, what did it feel like to you he was doing? It felt like I was being like examined by an OBGYN. He was like saying things while like poking me, said I was tight, things like that. What was going on through your head at the time? I was just kind of like, I don't know how to react to this. I don't want to upset him and like get upset or make him upset. I really just, it was one of those things. I was just like, okay, just get through it. What do you recall happening next? Shortly after that, I was like on all fours and he started giving me oral sex from behind. And there was like a pause, a brief pause. He told me to flip over. And I thought I don't really know what was going on in my head when he told me to flip over. So I flipped over. And when I flipped over, I noticed there was an iPad. And where we're at, imagine this is on the bed. So there's like a little desk, like right here, and a lamp and an iPad, and it's recording. I could see myself, and I see he's giving me oral sex. It's just, it goes on. I see the camera. I don't say anything about the camera. After he finishes performing oral on me, his pants are already off, so he starts getting ready to penetrate me. And I said, "Are you going to use a condom?" And he said, "We don't need a condom." What do you recall happening next? He penetrated me. It didn't go on for very long. It was just a long time. It wasn't a long time. The whole time he was telling me what to say, how to moan. He was saying, don't look away from the camera to look sexy. It was very, like, there was a few times like he would pause because I wasn't getting aroused, and it was kind of like difficulties with him getting inside of me, so it didn't happen very long. After he finished, he kind of let out a sigh, like disappointment. Right away he told me, like there was a lot I had to learn when it came to sex, and that I need to learn how to moan, how to arch my back, how to please him, how to position better, be more sexy during sex. I kind of was just like, okay, I took it as, I guess, constructive criticism. It was just, I really didn't care how he thought I looked because I just didn't really know what to do. Like, that was my first time. After that, it was a brief pause. He looked at me. He said, if you're really like 16, you can tell daddy. And I said, I kind of like paused, kind of laughed. I was like, I'm not 16. I was like, I'm 19. I was like, you want to see my driver's license? He said no. He believed me. And then after that, he put on his clothes, got his backpack, and he left. After he left, how did you feel? I was embarrassed because I felt like maybe I really I felt like I was bad at sex. Was I that bad at sex? I only had one boyfriend, so that didn't have a whole bunch of partners. I only had one boyfriend, so I didn't have a whole bunch of partners or really knew what I was doing. Canic, Your Honor, may we approach briefly? Donnelly, sure. I guess the man was saying, girl, you acting like you're 16, like you ain't never had sex before, like you don't know what you're doing. Why are you flying across town, acting grown and fast, and you just ain't experienced on what's about to happen here? So, there was a sidebar, and whatever they were talking about, it was sealed. And I think this is where the confusion comes in about this whole notion where somebody was saying, someone in the courtroom was saying that, I guess the investigator, because remember when they started by attorney Scholar was out with an investigator. So it appears, and I'm just speculating, trying to put this whole 2013 story in context, if it indeed happened, that maybe the investigator brought them some information regarding a 2013 incident. And then when Connick was on cross-examination, instead of him bringing up 2013, he accidentally said 2017. And at that point, he couldn't go any further because he had messed up the opportunity to get this information before the jury, even though he knew that Donnelly was going to object. And so that's what I think took place. You guys can let me know in the comments what you think took place. But in any event, it's redacted. The sidebar conversation is redacted. So we don't know what the heck they were talking about. And the conversation went on for 1, 2, 3 pages. And so then they're back in open court. And then the other comment I wanted to make. So sometimes these sidebars are happening outside the presence of the jury. So I don't know if the judge and the attorneys are leaving the courtroom and having this conversation, or if they're turning their mics off and they're having the conversation at the judge's podium, where she's sitting at, and then people can't hear. I don't know if the microphones are turned off to the audio feed so that the people that are watching, the reporters and other people are watching, can't hear the conversation. So I'm not sure if these sidebars that are getting redacted have been heard by other people other than the judge and the attorneys and the court reporter. So it goes on, and then they're back in open court. And then Donnelly says, okay, next question. And then Ms. Shahada continues. And she says, now, at any point before the defendant penetrated you that day in the hotel room, had the defendant told you that he had herpes? No, he didn't. Had he told you he had any other STD? No, he didn't. Did he use a condom that day? No, he didn't. Now, I think you testified that at some point during the interaction in the hotel room, you noticed an iPad. Is that right? Correct. And you noticed it recording? Correct. And you also testified that during your interaction, the defendant was saying things to you about how to moan? Correct. And what to say? Correct. Do you recall anything about what he told you to say? I like it, daddy, things like that. Now, after the defendant left the room that day, what did you do? Okay, then let me stop here again, because if I'm in a room with somebody, now she said he came in and he took his clothes off. So I'm assuming that at some point she saw that he had an iPad in his hand. I think she talked about a backpack. Now, when he was telling her to get in the bed and get on all fours, like be on her back, because I'm not understanding how you're on all fours if you're on your back. If somebody's telling you to lay down on your back and get on all fours, like that is, I think, is pretty much impossible unless you're doing what we used to do as a kid, where you would lay on your back and then put your hands, lift your hands backwards by your head and lift your feet up, and then you would like arch your back, like gymnasts do that. And it was something we used to do as kids. That's the only way she could have been on her bike and on all fours at the same time. So that was a little confusing to me. But I think at some point she had to have been aware that he had taken this iPad out of the bag and that he had set the iPad up on the table, because that's not something you can do in a matter of seconds. that was something that had to have taken at least a minute or two for him to get it out of the bag, walk over to the nightstand, turn it on, position it so that it was getting the right angle. And I'm sure at the entire time all this was going on, she was looking at him. She was following his every movement. So to me, if she didn't want to be recorded, then she could have said, no, you cannot record me, don't record me. But they are skipping over that part of the conversation that had to have taken place. And if she's so innocent, she would not have wanted to be recorded. I'm sorry. Like, if you are so inexperienced, you've only had one boyfriend, seemed like you would have been a little more shy. You wouldn't be so open to, like, I could see her flying to meet him, to be at the concert. To me, that's normal. That's nothing out of the place. But then when it came to the hotel room, having him come into the hotel room, if she was not down for the cause, she would have objected to that. She would have said, no, I don't want to do that. So back to the testimony. Okay, so she says, now after the defendant left the room that day, what did you do? After he left, I took a shower and got back into bed. I had called on my best friend at the time, told her how the interaction went because I really was just wondering if it was off. Was it me? So I got her opinion on it. And what else did you do that day? After that, nothing else. At some point, did you contact anyone you knew in New York about meeting up? Yes. And who did you contact? My former high school best friend. She was there for a track meet. And what, if anything, did you agree to do with your friend in New York? We agreed that since we both were in New York, we would meet up for lunch. And after you, by the way, was that a female friend? Yes. And after you made plans with her, what, if anything, did you do? I had let Diana know what I was planning on doing. And why did you do that? Because he had told me to inform her of anything I was going to do or needed. When you say he, are you referring to the defendant? Correct. May I approach, Your Honor? Yes. I'm about to show you what's been marked for identification as Government Exhibit 208B. Do you recognize Government Exhibit 208B? Correct. And prior to your testimony here today, you have had an opportunity to look through Government Exhibit 208B. Yes, I have. And is it an 80-page document? It is. And does this consist of screenshots of text messages between you and Diana Copeland from May 18, 2017 through February 4th, 2018? Yes. I move to admit Government Exhibit 208B. Any objection? None. Okay, that's in evidence. Now, I'm showing you page 7 of Government Exhibit 208B. Actually, before I do that, you said you contacted Diana to let... Okay, sorry about that. My daughter came in. Okay, so now I'm showing you page 7 of Government Exhibit. Actually, before I do that, you said you contacted Diana to let you know her plans, right? Yes. How did you go about doing that? I texted her. I'm showing you page 7 of Government Exhibit 208B. Again, are the texts in green from you to Diana? Yes, they are. And is there a series of texts from May 19, 2017? Yes. And at the bottom, you can read what that text says. Just keeping you updated, I'm going to go get food in a little bit. Won't be far. And was that you informing Diana about your plan with your friend? Yes. And did Diana respond to you? She told me to let Mr. Kelly know. And is that here on the top of page 8 of Government Exhibit 208B? Yes. Did you contact the defendant? Yes. And what happened when you contacted the defendant? Well, I had sent a text the same way I had texted Diana, and he had called me. And I told him, hey, I'm thinking I'm going to go meet one of my friends for dinner. I'll be back. He kind of just laughed at me. He was like, what? And I was like, I'm going to go with one of my friends. And he was like, no, you're not. And he was like, he doesn't like for anybody to move without him. He told me it was dangerous for me to be by myself in New York. He told me that I could just order room service, that there was room service, to just order it from the room service. And he told me that when the room service arrives, that don't let them see me, for one, don't let them come in the room and give you the food. They will leave it outside the door and I'll get it. He said if it's a woman, just have her set the food down, sign the bill, and go on. He said, but if it was a man, I don't let him see me at all, that I ask him to leave the bill at the door. And after speaking with the defendant, did you end up going to meet your friend for dinner? No. Why not? Because he told me it wasn't safe to not do it, so I didn't. What, if anything, did you end up doing instead? Ordering room service. And did you stay in your hotel room all day? Yes. Did you go to any other parts of the hotel? No. Why not? I was just stayed in the room so I wouldn't have to ask or wait for him to come. I just stayed. Okay, my question is, if it had been me, I just would have called my friend and said, okay, we're going to have dinner in my room, so come on up or come over to the hotel. Like, I don't know. This just seems really weird to me that you're in New York with this celebrity. Seems like she would have wanted to share with people that that's who she was there with, that she would have invited the friend to the hotel. They would have had lunch in the room in the hopes that he was going to show up at the room at some point, and then she could have introduced her friend to him. So the fact that she is just, I don't know, she's acting kind of weird to me. But anyway. What, if anything, did you understand you needed to do if you were going to go to another part of the hotel? Check in and make sure that was okay with him first. Did you end up seeing the defendant again on that trip? No. Okay, so, I mean, she could have went on with her friend, hung out, did whatever, because it wouldn't have made a difference. So when, if at all, did you fly home to San Antonio? On May 20th. So she was there for several days and didn't see him? Wow. So after that trip to New York, what, if any, communications did you have with the defendant? After the trip to New York, we still had the same communication, phone calls and texts and FaceTiming. Mainly after I saw him in person, it went more from texting to phone calls. How, if at all, did the substance of your conversations change after your first trip to New York? When I got home, we had a conversation and he was telling me that there was just a lot I had to learn about being with him, and that as I get to know him more, it will be better. I'll understand. He just told me anything he tells me is constructive criticism to make me better, to make me more of a woman, and I understood. I said I understood. These were all the things that he said to you? Yes. What, if anything, did the defendant say to you about seeing you again? He said he wanted to see me again. He told me again, just let him know when he was ready. Let him know when he was ready. I would think let him know when she was ready. But anyway, double check with him on the days, things like that. Did you in fact see him again? I did. Where did you see him again? I saw him in Chicago in June of 2017. Where did you travel to Chicago from? From San Antonio, Texas. Who booked your flights? Diana. Who paid for them? R. Kelly. About how long did you stay in Chicago? About 2 days. Where did you stay in Chicago? I stayed at a hotel. Who paid for the hotel? R. Kelly. After you arrived in Chicago, do you recall how you got to the hotel? Uber picked me up from the airport and took me to the hotel. Who arranged for that Uber? Diana Copeland. Did you see the defendant the day you arrived in Chicago? I did not. When, if at all, did you see him? The following day. Where did you see him? I saw him at his Chicago studio. I'm showing you what is evidence as Government's Exhibit 503A. Do you recognize this? Yes, I do. What do you recognize this to be? The studio. Is that the studio that you saw the defendant at in Chicago in June 2017? Correct. Do you recall how you got to the studio that day? Diana called me an Uber to the studio. What happened after you arrived at the studio? Once I arrived at the studio, I let Diana know I was there. She said she would let Mr. Kelly know and somebody would be with me shortly to open the door. At some point, did somebody open the door? Yes. Who was that? R. Kelly. What happened after that? He opened the door. He said, hey. He had a smile on his face. He was friendly, warm. We walked inside. I looked around for a little bit, not long. He was directing me where to go, and I said something like, you still have your Christmas tree up, in a normal tone. He was like, shh, and I wasn't even yelling. We sat by the bar, and he looked at me. At the time, I had a black eye. I told him about it. He looked at me. He said, titties still there? Your ass still there? Okay, stand up. I stood up again. He turned me around. He was like, your eyes don't look that bad. Your eye don't look that bad. That was the end of the conversation about my eye. We sat not even, which I want to know why you had a black eye. What happened that you had a black eye? But anyway, we're going to see if they eventually get to this black eye. We sat not even for a full 5 minutes. Again, I said something. He said, shh, again. He was looking back, making sure nobody was coming. He looked back, looked forward, pulled his peen out of his pants. We were this close to each other. He said, suck on daddy. And he pulled my neck down to start giving him oral. About how long had you been in the building at that point? About 10 minutes. Before that happened, what, if anything, did the defendant say to you about your clothes? Again, when I walked in, he had told me to take off my pants. I had told him that I was on my period. Right away, he told me, don't say you're on your period. Say your friend came. Say it. So I said, my friend came. He said, okay. That's when he looked back for a couple seconds. Conversation wasn't long, and pulled out his peen. After he pulled out his peen, where did he put it? In my mouth. And about how long did that go on for? Oh my God. It was probably like 30 minutes long. It was a long time. Girl. After the defendant finished at some point, did he say anything to you? He told me that his words were, if he wants to go to a movie and the movie is 2 hours long, he said, it might be me and you. The movie might be 2 hours long, but you're going to be sucking my peen the whole time. He kind of just chuckled. I was like, oh, okay. After that, he looked at me. He said he wanted to take some pictures of me. He told me to text Diana and tell her to get me an Uber to take me to the water tower to get some lingerie from Victoria's Secret. He dug in his pocket and he pulled out $200. He told me to buy some lingerie and Diana would arrange everything. You mentioned the water tower. What is the water tower? A shopping center in Chicago. What was going through your head after that interaction? I really was just again confused. He didn't really get to talk much that time. Well, we really didn't get to talk much that time. It was really rushed, so I felt like he had something to do. So after I went to the mall, bought some lingerie, and he never saw me again on that trip. He just did this girl. Like, I really, really feel sorry for Faith. I'm sorry, y'all. I know she's the enemy. But I feel so sorry for her and the way that this man is treating her and the way that she is allowing this man to treat her. I mean, it's not criminal, but it is sad and pathetic. So, Shahida, at any point on that trip, did the defendant tell you he had herpes? No. Or any other STD? No. Where, if anywhere, did you go after you left Chicago? Back to San Antonio, Texas. How, if at all, did the defendant and you keep in contact after the Chicago trip? Texting, calling, FaceTiming, consistent conversations the same as before, nothing changed. At some point after this Chicago trip, without saying what you read, did you come across a negative article about the defendant? Correct. Around when was that? Around July of 2017. At some point, did you have a conversation with the defendant about those matters that you had seen?
Correct. We had a conversation. It wasn't direct, it was through text. And I had noticed that he would normally call me in the morning or whatever, and his calls and texts had slowed down. So I texted him and I said, I hope you're okay. I didn't really accuse him of anything. I didn't ask. I said, I hope you're okay. I know it's a lot that is going on. He texted me back and said thank you and to pray for him. And that night, and that right now, a lot of people were against him. And he was like, he wouldn't have to cheat anybody. Did you see the defendant after that? Yes. Where did you see him again? After that trip, I saw him again in Dallas. Around when was that? December 2017. About 6 months after you saw him in Chicago? Correct. How did you travel to Dallas? Diana arranged for my plane ticket to be booked. Where did you fly to Dallas from? San Antonio. Did Diana book your flights? She did. Who paid for your flights? R. Kelly. About how long did you stay in Dallas? I stayed in Dallas for about a 3-day trip. Where did you stay in Dallas? At the Statler. Is that a hotel? Yes. Who made the hotel arrangements for you? Diana Copeland did. Who paid for your hotel? R. Kelly. Okay, and I said this because I did the second half of this testimony before I'm doing this testimony, but in the first video, I mentioned the fact that I find it so weird that she refers to him as R. Kelly. And I also shared that I have dated men that are known by their street name, by their nickname, or how the majority of the people in the world know them, but I never refer to them by that street name or that nickname. I always refer to them by their name, or if we have like a special name that I've given him, I'll refer to him that way. But I find it weird that she is trying to pretend like she's in this relationship, or she's convinced herself that she's in this relationship with him, but yet she is referring to him by his stage name, not by his real name or a nickname that they have between them. So anyway, it says, what, if anything, was the defendant in Dallas for at that time? He had a concert. Where, if anywhere, did you see the defendant after you arrived in Dallas? I first saw him at a cigar bar. How was it that you ended up at the cigar bar? Diana had arranged for a car to pick me up from the hotel and meet me at the cigar bar. And meet him at the cigar bar. When you say him, you're referring to the defendant. Correct. What happened when you got to the cigar bar? When I arrived at the cigar bar, he was already there. His entourage, his sprinter was there. It's like a shopping center, but there are benches and things in the front. It was like a little bit of people, not a whole bunch, but they were all fans. When I pulled up, he took his last couple of pictures. When he saw that I was there, he asked everybody to put their phones up. After that, we walked inside the cigar bar. When you say we walked inside the cigar bar. Me, Diana, R. Kelly, and his entourage. What happened? You got inside? Once we got inside, right away, Diana told me where to sit. She was sitting across from me. There was nobody there for me to interact with. There was a gentleman I did not know to my left, 2 seats away. He was talking to the owners, just being friendly. They offered me a bottle of champagne. Wait a minute, guys. They offered me a bottle of champagne. He got me a bottle of champagne. Who offered you a bottle of champagne? R. Kelly. You said someone was talking to the owners. Who are you referring to? R. Kelly. What happened after you were offered champagne? After I got the champagne, I was sitting there probably had 2 glasses of champagne for the amount of time I was there. There was a moment where I had my legs crossed to the left, and there was a man on my left side. And he had came behind me and he whispered in my ear. He said, sit up and straighten my legs and turn them the other way. Who said that? Kelly. He told me that my legs should never be pointed to another man when I'm in public with him. Where, if anywhere, did you go after the cigar bar? After the cigar bar, there was an older gentleman there that he said was his uncle, and he told me to get in the car with him, and Diana would ride me to the venue, that we would follow the Sprinter, and we did. Did you see what, if any, car the defendant got into? His Sprinter. What happened after you got to the concert venue? When we arrived to the concert venue, we arrived in the back. We talked to his dressing room. We walked to his dressing room. Diana was there with me as well. She showed me his side of the dressing room. There was some Hennessy and cranberry juice. He told her to make me a drink. She did. I had maybe a cup or two before the show started. There was a moment where it was just me and Diana. He came in and told her she could leave, and it was just me and him. We engaged in sex before the show. At that point, how much had you had to drink that day? I had a little bit of champagne before. I was drinking Hennessy and cranberry, probably a cup and a half. I wasn't belligerently drunk, but I was feeling it. What, if anything, happened after the defendant had sex with you that day? After we had sex, Diana knocked before she entered, and she let him know he had 10 minutes. So again, he got dressed and he went on stage. Diana, she walked me to where I was going to be sitting. Again, my seat was close to the stage to where he could see me. I could see him. And did you stay for the whole concert? Yes. How, if at all, did the defendant interact with you during the concert? Again, just like the times before, coming like right where I was. This time he was a little bit more direct. He caught the attention of the people behind me. He was just entertaining, I guess, me from where I was at. What happened after the concert? After the concert, we went backstage. Diana had came and got me from my seat again, escorted me backstage. The backstage room, it was pretty big. There's like a curtain that split the room in the middle. I could hear other people on the other side, but I couldn't see them. I heard there was a younger woman and her mom, and they were playing her music. I could hear them laughing, things like that. They ended up coming on the side that I was on to change a song. I could hear him too on that side as well, but I wasn't entertaining them. They weren't entertaining me. It was just me and Diana. There was a moment where he had peeked in again. He was like, Diana, make her a drink. She got up right away, made me another drink. That's really what the scene was like backstage. Did Diana make you more than one drink? Yes. Had you had anything to eat at that point? No. Where did you go? Where, if anywhere, did you go after this time backstage? I didn't go anywhere backstage. I just stayed back there. My question was unclear. Did you leave that area that you were in at some point? Yes. Where, if anywhere, did you go? Back to the hotel. How did you get there? Uber. When you got back to the hotel, what kind of state were you in? When I got back to the hotel, I was drunk by then. Did you hear from the defendant after you got back to the hotel? I probably had like maybe 2 hours of sleep, and he was knocking on the door. And what happened then? He came in again. We had sex. I didn't remember this time if it was recorded or not. And that was it. He had left some jewelry there. So the next day I let him know he had left his jewelry. Did you see the defendant again on that trip? Yes. Where did you see him? When he had came to get his jewelry. Did he come back to your hotel room? Yes. When he got back to your hotel room, that, if anything, do you recall the defendant saying to you? Our conversation in the hotel room, that was really one of the more serious conversations we ever really had. I had never seen him cry until that conversation, or really get deep into his personal self. When he walked in, he didn't seem like super happy, but he didn't seem upset. I thought he was just coming to get his jewelry. He went on a ramble. He said, people always talk about the bad I've done, but they never talk about the good. He stated that nobody ever talks about the money he donates to charity. They don't talk about the events that he's had to give back or how he likes to feed the homeless, things like that. He got really emotional. He had expressed to me some things that happened to him when he was a child. What, if anything, did the defendant say during that conversation about protecting him? He asked me if I would protect him. And what happened after that? After he asked me if I would protect him, I said yes. That came with a brief pause. After that, he told me that an attorney was going to be coming up and she has some papers for me to sign. He was like, just some papers, that state our business is our business and that you'll protect me. And again, he asked me. Again, he said, will you protect me? I said yes. After that, he goes on. He finishes telling me things. It gets deeper, he says, because we hadn't seen each other in a couple of months since the last trip. He says there's been a lot said about me, a lot going on. He revealed to me, he said, there are some females that I'm raising. I have a group of women that I raised. He said, some women have been with me for 5 years. Some women have been with me for a year. Some women have been with me for 15 years. He stated that these women were his family, that they protect him, that they love each other. He really presented it like a family dynamic, not so much like a relationship, but more like they were a family. He stated that the reason why he liked me was that I reminded him of the girls. And I asked him, I said, do you all sleep together? He said, yes. I had told him I'm not into girls at all. He said, well, if I want both of you to suck my peen, ultimately it's about pleasing me. So you're going to suck my peen with her. Again, it was just one of those things I tried to chuckle off. I didn't think like, okay, I guess so. He must be serious. He paused again. He kind of had this look on his face like he was uncomfortable after he had told me everything. He said, you were at the concert, right? I said, yes. He said, you're right there, he said. And they, the girls, referring to the girls, he said, they were on the side of me. You didn't even know. He said, wherever I go, they go. He had explained to me that it's a group of them. They are involved. He said they love each other, but he was like, as far as talking about ex-boyfriends or anything really too personal, he said that they didn't discuss that with me, with one another. He said he trusted them and they trusted him back. Okay, you testified that the defendant said something to you about a lawyer coming up to the room and you signing something, correct? Now, did a lawyer end up coming to the room? No, the attorney never came. Did the defendant talk to you about anything that he wanted you to write? After maybe about 30 minutes of us sitting there, no attorney came. Again, when he's in deep thought, he'll pause. And he said that again, he needed me to protect him. And he said that there was going to be, basically, he needed me to write down something about my family that I didn't want anybody to know. And I said, well, there's nothing I could think of that I don't want anybody to know. Nothing about your dad or your mom. No, he's like, I can help you with that. What did you understand him to mean? That he would help me come up with a lie to form on my family or parents if I couldn't think of one of my own. Shortly after that, he asked me to pull out my phone, and I pulled out my phone, and he said, this time he gave me another number to group text with. He had me group text these numbers. He said, I want you to text this. He told me exactly what to text, down to what emoji to use. He said, text this for me. Daddy, I want to be with you and the girls. He was like, but put praying hands emojis. I like this, indicating like, please. He asked me if I understood what to type. I said yes. He said, did you send it? I said yes. He said, good. After that, he told me to get dressed. We were going to go out, and I did. Okay, the letter that he asked you to write with things about your family, did you end up doing that? No. Was it after that that he asked you to send the text you just described? Correct. You testified that The text you sent was a group text. Is that right? Correct. Do you have any understanding about who that text was being sent to? I was sending the group text to all his numbers. He has different phones. I was sending that text to multiple phones. Belonging to the defendant? Correct. What, if anything, did the defendant say to you in that hotel room in Dallas about rules? He had let me know that they had rules and that pretty much they are understood, they are followed. He has a way to be greeted, down to the rules as to when he walks in the room, everybody greets each other. They all kiss him, things like that. When you say they, who are you referring to? The girls. The defendant's girls? Correct. What, if any, impression did you have about why the defendant was telling you all these things? The impression that I had was, I guess he felt like we were at Canic. Objection. Donnelly, I'll sustain that as to form. Shahada. What was going through your head after the defendant told you these things? I guess that he trusted me. Canic. Same objection, Your Honor. Shahada. It's her own thoughts. Donnelly, thank you for telling me that. The objection is sustained. After he told you to get dressed, did he say anything what to get dressed for? He said we were going out. He asked me what there was to do in Dallas since I was from Texas, and I told him there were hookah bars open on Sundays late. After you got dressed, where, if anywhere, did you go? We went to downstairs to his room. He sent me downstairs to his room after we got dressed. The defendant took you downstairs? Correct. Did you know where you were going when you were leaving your hotel room? I was under the impression that we were leaving, like going out. Heading to the hookah bar? Correct. What happened when you got to the defendant's hotel room? When I got to R. Kelly's room, he was knocking on the door. He didn't just go in. He opened the door and there was another woman in there. How, if at all, did that other woman greet the defendant after the door opened? She said, "Hey, Daddy." She had a big smile on her face and she kissed him. What happened next? He turned to kiss me. And what, if anything, did the defendant say? I was like, "You're going to kiss me after you just kissed her?" He was like, "Yes." He reminded again that's how they greeted. Did the defendant say anything about who this woman was? He introduced her to me as Joy. I'm showing you what is in evidence as Government's Exhibit 78. Do you recognize this photo? Yes. Who is this in this photo? Joy. Was that the woman in the room that day? Yes. What, if any, discussion did the defendant have with you and Joy? Withdrawn. First of all, what kind of hotel room was it that you went to that day that Joy was in? We were in his hotel suite. And what, if any, discussion did the defendant have with you and Joy in the hotel suite? He quickly introduced us. He said, "Joy, Faith, Faith, Joy." He said, "You all get to know each other," just like that. When he said you all get to know each other, did he have any other instructions about that? That he just reminded me again, they don't discuss their boyfriends, things like that, things that he said, quote unquote, were disrespectful to him. So what, if anything, did you discuss with Joy? When me and Joy had a conversation, our conversation was not really a two-way conversation. She kind of just looked me up, from up and down. She said literally everything I had on, she said she liked. I like your hair, I like your shoes, I like your jeans, I like your shirt, literally from top to bottom, complimenting me. Did you see how Joy was dressed that day? Yes, he had told me to wear heels, and I looked at her and she had on heels as well, but her hair wasn't done. Her clothes weren't very fashionable. Her toenails were chipped. Her nails were broken. She just looked very unkept. Girl, now you gonna talk about Joy like that? So then Shahada said, "Now you testified that she complimented you on what you were wearing. Is that right?" Correct. How did that happen in the hotel? Now, did that happen in the hotel suite or somewhere else? This happened outside the hotel suite. So after you went to the hotel suite with the defendant and met Joy, was that the first time you had met Joy? Yes. Where, if anywhere, did the three of you go after that? After he quickly introduced us, we went down to the elevator. He said in a moment he was going to go get the car, so we were just waiting. It was just us two, and that's where she had complimented me. Now, at some point, did the defendant come back? Okay, I remember she said at some point, and it might be in the video before this, where he told her that they compliment each other, they're kind to each other, and that type of stuff. So maybe she's saying that Joy was robotic in complimenting her, like she had been trained to do that. That's what I'm going to go with, that she's trying to imply here. So now at some point, did the defendant come back? Yes. And what did he come back with? He came back with the Sprinter. And what happened then? He said, let's go. We got up to leave. Before we got in the Sprinter, he lit his cigar and Joy was lighting it for him. Who got in the Sprinter? Me, R. Kelly, and Joy. And what part of the Sprinter did the three of you get into? The riding side of the Sprinter. What, if anything? Well, you describe what you saw in the Sprinter when you went inside. Well, I opened the door to the Sprinter. There is 2 seats back like this, and there's 2 seats that will sit in front of you. So you would be sitting across from each other. I noticed there was like a Victoria's Secret bag. I saw like multiple bra and panties, like toothbrush, hairbrushes, like maintenance stuff. And when you were in the back of the Sprinter, could you see who was in the front? No. Why was it that you couldn't see who was in the front? In the Sprinter, say I'm sitting where behind normally in like a truck or SUV. There's like a little window where you could see who is driving, where you could open it and say something. It was almost like it wasn't cardboard, it wasn't brick. It was just like don't know what to call it, but it was something that was screwed over that piece to where it wasn't showing. So I couldn't see who was driving or in the passenger seat, and they couldn't see me either. And when you say the passenger seat, you mean the front passenger seat next to the driver? Correct. Now, when you entered the Sprinter, did you notice if there was anyone in the front passenger seat before getting inside? Yes, Diana got in the Sprinter with us as well. And where did she get in? In the front driver's passenger seat. And where, if anywhere, did you all go in the Sprinter? We had went to the hookah bar that I told him about. And by the way, was there also a driver in the Sprinter? Correct. Now, what, if anything, happened to the driver to the hookah bar? On the drive to the hookah bar, I'm sorry, she asked her what happened on the drive, not the driver. So on the drive to the hookah bar, he had asked me, who did I listen to for Christmas? And I said, Johnny Gill Christmas album. And he laughed at me. He said, Joy, turn on my Christmas album. So she turned on his Christmas album. He pulls out a bottle of Ciroc and he drinks. He passes it to Joy. She drinks. He says, pass it to her. And I kind of like hesitated. I was like, I don't think I want to drink it. He was like, drink. He was like, drink. So I drank it. And we did that for a good 10 minutes. We were just passing the bottle around. The bottle was full, and by the time we were done, it was damn near empty. And at some point, did the Sprinter arrive at the hookah bar? It did. And what happened when the Sprinter arrived? When we arrived to the hookah bar, he got up. He said, y'all stay here. He said, I'm going to go scope the scene. Oh, child, I'm getting tired. Okay, I'm going to go scope the scene to make sure there ain't too many niggas in there. Those were his words. So he got up. Diana came to open the door, let him out, and they both went inside to the hookah bar. When you say they both went, do you mean Diana and the defendant? Correct. She followed him. And where did you and Joy stay? In the Sprinter. How long did you enjoy stay in the Sprinter? We were in the Sprinter for some hours. It wasn't just a minute, a minimum wait, 45. We were in there for some hours. And what time of year was this again? This was in December. And at some point while you were in the Sprinter, did you feel uncomfortable? I felt uncomfortable. I started just getting hot. The heat was on and I was already holding my pee for a long time. Yeah. And when that happened, what did you do? I had let Diana know that I had to use the bathroom, and she said, okay, stand by. And it took her a minute to get there. I called his phone. When you say a minute, what do you mean? Excuse me, not a minute. It took a long time for. Are you saying a minute as in a slang term? Yes, excuse me. A minute is slang. When I say a minute, I really mean a long time. Now, did you at some point try to open the door to the Sprinter? Yes, there was a moment where, because I was kind of like nodding off, and then when I would nod off and be like, I'm still here, I looked at Joy and I tugged on it, and she was like, okay, tugged on what? The door. And she said, you have to ask. But even when I tugged on the door, it didn't move. And she was like, the door is broken and you have to ask. So I was like, okay. So when you tried to open the door, it did not open. It did not open. And what did you do after you tried to open the door? It didn't open, and Joy told you you had to ask. That's when I began to contact Diana first, and then R. Kelly. It wasn't until I tested Diana that I was like, okay, I feel like I'm about to pass out, is when somebody came out and drove me to a bathroom. Now, you testified that someone finally came to the Sprinter. Is that correct? Correct. Who came? Diana came and he came. And what happened then? After they arrived, they drove me and Joy and R. Kelly to IHOP to use the bathroom. And what happened once you arrived at the IHOP? Again, Diana came and opened the door. She said she asked who all had to use the bathroom. Me and Joy both went. She followed us to the bathroom. She opened the door for us. When we got to the bathroom, we used the bathroom. When I was using the bathroom, excuse me, Joy, she washed her hands. She didn't use the bathroom, but when I used the bathroom, Diana was standing outside the stall. She opened it for me. When I was washing my hands, she was waiting. She opened the door to let me out, and again, we went back into the Sprinter. And did Diana use the bathroom at all? She did not. What happened after you got back to the Sprinter? Once we got back to the Sprinter, he asked if he could talk to me. And so I stepped outside the Sprinter and we had a conversation. And he asked me why I wasn't feeling good. Again, I had reminded him at the time that I was epileptic, and drinking at that time was my trigger. I had been involved in an accident prior to, and I never had to deal with seizures, but now I did, and I knew that drinking was a trigger. So I was reminding him, just of everything we had already talked about before I got there. So let's back up a moment. So you mentioned you're epileptic, is that right? Correct. And around when did you develop epilepsy? Around late 2015. And what happened that resulted in you developing epilepsy? My high school boyfriend at the time, after graduation, he had got a girl pregnant, and we ended up getting into it. She had stabbed me in my lung, in my shoulder, in my back. And were you hospitalized for a period of weeks? Yes. And after that, did you develop epilepsy? Yeah, from the head trauma. Now, you testified that you had discussed this was with the defendant before. Is that right? Correct. Do you recall approximately when in the time you knew him, you had first discussed this with him? We discussed it before I even flew to meet him. We were having those basic conversations about who I was, and he asked me if I had any boyfriend. I had let him know I only had one boyfriend, and it really didn't go that well. Things like that. And that's when you told him about the stabbing? Correct. And the epilepsy? Correct. All right. Now, going back to after the IHOP, When you went to the bathroom at the IHOP in Dallas and the defendant was speaking to you, I think you just testified. You mentioned you brought up the fact that you get seizures to him then again as well. Yes, correct. He had asked me what a seizure was again. He said, "What's a seizure again?" So I explained to him what a seizure was, and he said, "Oh, well, I can't have you on the road with me when you're sick, so I need you to get better." And I was just like, it's not really anything to get better from. It's just seizures. Might happen if I'm sitting overheating drunk. Now, after you used the bathroom at the IHOP, where, if anywhere, did you go? After we came from IHOP, we returned back to the hotel. And who went back to the hotel? All of us. Me, Diana, R. Kelly, Joy. And once you got back to the hotel, where in the hotel did you go? I went back to my hotel room. When I got out of the Sprinter, he instructed Diana he said, "Diana, make sure you go in and watch her. Make sure she's all right." And she did. She followed me up to my room. I had showered, laid down. It was probably about an hour she stayed. She was just sitting. She just wasn't talking. After an hour, she got up. She told me she was going back to her hotel room, and I said, "Okay." Did you see the defendant again on that trip? I did. And do you recall when you saw the defendant again on that trip? On my way out and on his way out as well. When you say on your way out, what do you mean? I was leaving Dallas and so was he. And did you see him at the hotel? Correct, in front of the hotel we met. And what, if any, conversation did you have with him at that time? He had let me know that now things were getting more serious. He said that I probably, the next time, would stay for 2 weeks. He wanted me to come with him, come to him and stay at his house for 2 weeks. He had made a comment. He said I was gaining weight. So he was like, "For 2 weeks, I want you to come get right." He said he was going to get me a personal trainer. He just hurt this poor girl feelings all over the place. He also stated that he didn't like that when he has sex with me, he can't get in me. He said that I needed to get a dildo that was the size of his peen, and I needed to start using it so that he doesn't have any problems when we're having sex. And what type of problem did you understand him to be referring to when you were having sex? Not being able to penetrate me fully. Did you leave Dallas after that? Yes. And where did you go? Back to San Antonio. And did you continue to communicate with the defendant after you got back to San Antonio? Yes. How, if the all, did your communication, I think she meant if at all, did your communications with the defendant change after your trip to Dallas? After my trip to Dallas, actually our communication had changed to where the conversations weren't so much like sweet. It was more like you would think we were in a relationship, to where he told me, "I want to know where you go, who you going with, the address, if you're going out, ask me if you can go out." He said if there's going to be niggers there, he said I need to know who. So he wanted to know my home address and literally everywhere I went. And he said when he calls my phone, I need to answer it. If I don't pick up, that's an issue. And did you follow his instructions? I did. I'm going to show the witness only what's been marked for identification as government's exhibits 207E through H. May I approach, Your Honor? Yes. Can you take a look at those documents and let me know if you recognize them? Yes, I do. And generally speaking, what do you recognize these documents to be? Donnelly, are we out of a battery again? Faith, there you go. It's just low. Donnelly, is it low? Faith, yes. Donnelly, do you want to change the battery? And then she says, "Thanks, Donna." So Donna is the one that changed the battery. Okay, can you repeat the question? Sure. Generally speaking, what do you recognize the documents I just showed you to be? Text messages between me and R. Kelly. And are these screenshots of certain text messages from your phone? Correct. I move to admit government's exhibits 207E through H. Any objection? Canic? No. Those are in evidence. Thank you, Your Honor. Donnelly, I'm going to show you what's in evidence as government's exhibit 207E. Shahada. Now, at the top, does it indicate how many people you're sending this text message to? 3. And what does that refer to there? 3 different phone numbers, or 3 different phones. For who? R. Kelly. So it was a group text, but all to Kelly's phone. Correct. Now, are the texts, who are the texts engraved from? Him, the defendant. Correct. And the responses in blue on the right side are those from you? Correct. And at the top, is there a text from the defendant saying, "Where are you?" Correct. And you respond, "Olive Garden. Do you want me to call?" And then send him a photo. Is that right? Correct. Why did you do that? Because those were part of his rules. He wanted to know where I was at, what I was doing, so I just sent a picture. I'm showing you what's in evidence as government's exhibit 207F. The above referred to exhibit was published. Again, are those texts between you and the defendant? Correct. And can you describe what you sent the defendant that's shown on government's exhibit 207F? I'm showing him my outfit as I'm headed out to attend a funeral service. And what did you write to him? Daddy, I'm headed to the service. Just wanted to send you pics of what I'm wearing. Love you. He said, good girl, and sent a selfie back. Why did you send him these texts? Those were a part of the rules. I'm showing you government exhibit 207G. Again, are these texts between you and the defendant? Correct. And can you go through the text here? I was out shopping and he had called me, so I sent a picture to let him know I was still shopping, and then he replied, hey baby, I love you. I'm showing you what's in evidence as government's exhibit 207H. Again, are these texts between you and the defendant? Correct. And this photograph of someone's hand with nails, did you send that? Correct. And whose hand is that? Mine. Now, are the texts in blue from you? They are. And what did you write the defendant that day? I asked him if it was okay if I went out with my older sister, the one he had met. And was that the one he had met at the Tobin Center? Correct. And why did you send him that text? Making sure it was okay for me to go out following what he had asked me to do. Now, at some point, did you travel to see the defendant again? Yes. Where did you go? After my last trip to Dallas, my next trip was to Los Angeles. And where did you travel from to Los Angeles? I traveled from San Antonio. Around when was this trip? This trip was around January of 2018. And who booked your flights for that trip to Los Angeles? Diana. And who paid for your flights? R. Kelly. And how long did you stay in Los Angeles? Los Angeles was a 2-day stay, a weekend trip again. And do you recall where you stayed? At a Holiday Inn. And who paid for your hotel? Child, not the Holiday Inn. You downgrading, Faith. You ain't moving up, you moving down, sis. So, R. Kelly, what happened when you got to LA? When I arrived at LA, Diana called an Uber to pick me up and take me to the hotel. And what happened after you got to the hotel? Once I got to the hotel, I was told instructions on who to talk to or tell them, what name the room was under from Diana, and I went to my room. And do you recall whether the room was under your name there? I don't. I'm showing you what's in evidence, page 59 of Government's Exhibit 208B. Again, are these texts between you and Diana? Yes. And I'm actually going to show you the page before page 58. Do you see a text from January 12, 2018? Yes. Now, the texts in blue are from you, correct? Correct. The texts in gray are from Diana, correct. When you said at the top, is it under my name, what are you referring to? The hotel room. And now, did Diana respond? She said, Tell them I left the key with Billy. It's under Diana Copeland. And does that refresh your recollection as to what happened when you got to the hotel? Correct. What happened? I arrived to the hotel and I let them know that Diana Copeland had given me permission to her room. She said she left the key with Billy. They didn't ask me for any identification, didn't hesitate, gave me the room key and the number. Now, where, if anywhere, did you go after getting to the hotel? Once I arrived to the hotel, I didn't go anywhere immediately. I texted Diana and she told me, get ready, a car would pick me up and take me to the studio where he was. And where, if anywhere, did you first see the defendant after arriving in LA? At a studio in LA. And how did you get to that studio? Uber. Do you remember where the studio was located? In Los Angeles. Do you remember the specific address? No. I'm showing you pages 60 and 61 of Government's Exhibit 208B. These are again texts from Diana. Yes. And does this show her requesting an Uber for you to get to the studio? Yes. Turning to page 61. Did you ask her what building number the address was? Correct. And did she respond with first 11129 Weddington and then correcting it to 11128? Correct. Is that where the Uber took you? Correct. And what happened when you approached the building in the Uber? Once I got out the Uber, Diana met me outside the gate. She let me in. She walked me toward the Sprinter was parked outside the front of the studio, and she told me to wait in there, that Mr. Kelly would just be a moment. And where did you see Diana go? She went into the front part again of the Sprinter, and I went to the back part. And was anyone inside the Sprinter when you arrived was anyone inside the part of the Sprinter you went inside? No. And how long did you wait in the Sprinter? I was waiting in the Sprinter for him for over an hour. And at some point, did you need to use the bathroom? Yes. I'm showing you again page 61 of Government's Exhibit 208B. At the bottom of this page is that text in blue from you. Correct. And this is a text to Diana. Correct. And what did you write there? I need to use the bathroom, laugh out loud. And turning to the next page, how did Diana respond? Okay, stand by. Now, after Diana responded, okay, stand by, what happened? It was like probably a 15-minute wait before she came to the bike and opened the door and let me out to take me to the bathroom. And where did she take you? She walked me through the bike to the front where the restroom was. The back of the studio to the front. Do you mean the bike entrance of the studio? Correct. Now, before you texted Diana telling her you needed to use the bathroom, about how long had you been in the Sprinter waiting? It had already been hours. Okay, after Diana took you to the bathroom, where did she take you after that? Back to the Sprinter. At some point, did Diana take you anywhere else? She took me inside, yes. Inside the studio? Correct. And where did she take you? I'm sorry, can you repeat the question? Where did she take you in the studio? To the studio, to the actual recording part. I'm sorry, excuse me. And can you describe the room that Diana took you to for the jury? When I walked into the room, I knew I was in the studio. I knew I was in the recording side because there was a piano, there was a stand, a mic stand with a microphone in it. And so if you walk in, I'm looking at this side. So the engineering window is behind me, and all the windows is probably like windows from like that end to this end. They're all covered with like covers, drapes, blankets, curtains. If the curtains couldn't cover it, they throw a blanket over it. It was covered and nobody else was in there. There was a couch in there, a black couch, and there was two rooms. It looked like there was like a lounge room, and then another room had a whole bunch of his stuff in it. When you say his stuff, who are you referring to? R. Kelly's. And I think you testified that you saw, or what did you say about actually withdrawn? One moment, Your Honor. I'm showing you what's in evidence as Government Exhibit 946. Sorry, that's in evidence as Government Exhibit 946D. And that's a series of photographs that I'm going to show you. Do you recognize these photographs? Correct. And what do you recognize these photographs to be? The studio I was in LA, correct. And did the studio look exactly like these photographs when you were there? It did not. How was the studio different? The piano was in the middle, there was a big area rug, the lights were dim, there was a long black couch, there were a few chairs. And those rooms, that room on the left side was full of Christmas gifts. And on the right side, that's like the little lounge area. It wasn't that big. There was like 2 lounge chairs in there. So the little lounge room is the one I'm pointing to here. Correct. And showing you the third photograph in Government's Exhibit 946D. This area of the studio room, did it look like that when you were there? No. How was it different? It's different because the windows, you can see them. When I walked in, the whole room was covered. The whole window was covered. Like I said, there was a couch on that side as well, so your back would be to the window, and there was an area rug. And so the part I am pointing to, the window, internal window in the middle, is that the part you're referring to that was covered? Correct. And do you recall how it was covered? There was like curtains, drapes, and then on the corner where I guess the curtains couldn't reach, they just had like a tapestry thrown over it. Now, after Diana took you to that room, what happened? After Diana took me to that room, she took me in, she walked me in, she walked out. She just said, text me if you need anything. I said, okay. She said, he'll be in soon, maybe around like 15 minutes after we. And then Shahada cut her off and said, who did you understand her to be referring to when she said he would be in soon? R. Kelly. And then did Diana leave? She did. And then what happened after that? After she left, maybe about like 15 minutes, I was just sitting there and he came in really fast. He literally, like he was jogging in, like he was grabbing something. So he jogged in to get something and he jogged out. Who is the he? R. Kelly. He said, hey baby. I said, hey babe. It was really fast interaction. And did he leave after that? Yeah. And how long went by until you saw him again? Hours. A lot of hours. Now, prior to that, you mentioned there was a point where he came in and out really fast. Is that right? Correct. And prior to that day, had the defendant told you anything about what you should do when he entered the room? I should greet him back. I should be standing up, greeting him with love when he walks in the room. And did you do that day? I did not. Now, you said you ended up waiting in that room for hours. Is that right? Correct. At some point, did you text Diana? I did. And what were you texting her about? I had to use the bathroom again. And then I had asked her, like, did he want me to wait still, or could I go back to the room after a couple of hours? Now, I'm going to show you page 62 of Government Exhibit 208B, which is in evidence. And I am pointing to the text towards the upper middle, the blue, in blue. Is that a text from you? Yes. And what did you write there? I have to use the bathroom. Laugh out loud. Sorry. Do I wait for you? And how did Diana respond? Yes, wait for me. And what happened after that? That was like around like 2 something. So I was waiting for hours and I texted her again and I said, can I leave back to the room? Laugh out loud. Or he wants me to wait. And that's your text down there? Yes. And that's several hours. Is that right? Yeah, at 6:20 a.m. And did Diana respond about an hour later saying, please wait? Yes. Now, during the time you were waiting first in the Sprinter outside the studio and then inside the studio in that room, what, if anything, did you do? Nothing. Waited for him. Were you given any food during that time? No. Any water? No. Now, at some point, did you see the defendant again? Yes. And where did you see him? In that same room where I was waiting. What happened when he came in the room? Actually, Your Honor, this may be a good stopping point. Oh, all right. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to break for the day. I will see you tomorrow, same time. Do not talk about the case. Do not read any articles or listen to any news reports of the case. And obviously, do not talk to anybody about it. But please have a good night. I will see you tomorrow. Then the clerk, all rise. And then Donnelly, okay, the witness can step out and I will see you tomorrow. The witness exits the courtroom. Donnelly, everybody can have a seat. I'm sorry, I am prepared to rule on that matter we discussed at the side. Shahada, okay. Donnelly, you were not there, Mr. Scholar. With respect to the application to question the witness, I had ruled prior to trial, pursuant to Rule 412 of the Federal Rules of Evidence, that it was inappropriate to question any of the witnesses about prior sexual conduct, even when the court is considering it, if it is only in specific instances where it is offered to prove that someone else was the source of the injury or physical evidence, when it is evidence of specific instances offered to prove consent. And the third reason is if excluding the evidence would violate the defendant's constitutional rights. I have looked through the material, the 3500 material. I do not see, first of all, I do not see any evidence of the nature that counsel said there was. It is precisely the opposite, and none of the exceptions under Rule 412 apply. There is also the additional requirement that it has to be offered 14 days before the trial and that the victim has to be notified. None of those things have happened. I think it is an inappropriate line of inquiry. I am denying the application and you have an exception to the ruling. Canick, thank you, Your Honor. I just want to add one thing before the record. Donnelly, sure, but I cannot hear you. I'm sorry. Canick, regarding the 14-day rule, if Your Honor recalls, I only mentioned it, in fact, that what I did is, when I thought the victim opened the door, I asked to approach, right? And there was not an opportunity to give any notice because this was something that came up that the witness of her own volition offered regarding her history. And I just felt as though that, okay, based on that testimony, a door was open for me to make inquiry. Donnelly, I understand. As I said, I have reviewed the 3500 material. I do not see any basis to do that, so the application is denied. Is there anything else that we have to discuss? Canick, Your Honor, there was a reference in the, may we just go sidebar on this? Donnelly, sure. So, there was a sealed sidebar conference held on the record out of the hearing of the jury. And that lasted for 1 page. And then Donnelly comes back and 1 second. Oh, I hate when I lose my space. So Donnelly comes back and says, anything else before we break for the day? Canick, nothing else from us, Your Honor. Donnelly, anything from you? Shahada, nothing, Your Honor. Donnelly, nothing. Okay, see you tomorrow. And the matter was adjourned until September 1st, 2021. And then to see, as I stated, I did that video first because I really didn't think there was anything in this transcript that I hadn't already talked about from news reports that I had read. But because this issue came up about this 2013 date where allegedly Canick had asked about her filing a police report or something in 2013, and in that report or whatever the item was that was in dispute, that it allegedly said that she had tested positive for herpes in 2013. So I said, okay, let me go back, read that manuscript, and maybe I'm missing something. But once again, other than these redactments, there's nothing in the transcript that mentions a 2013 diagnosis of herpes. And once again, I am not sure if when they are having a sidebar, if people in the watching rooms, the listening rooms, can hear those conversations. I would think if it's a sidebar and the jury has been removed, that they also would turn off the microphones or turn off the feed or turn off the audio on the feed so that the people in the listening room can't hear that conversation. But that very well may not be the case. Maybe they can hear the sidebars and know what is going on between the judge and the attorneys. So guys, that's it for me. This wraps up the August 31st testimony, which included, I'll probably do if I go back and do the Suzette Mayweather transcript, I'll do it separately. But in this video, I excluded the Mayweather transcript. I talked about a person who worked for Homeland Security who testified very briefly, and it was just to open the door to be able to ask Faith questions about what was on the iPhones or the iPads or something like that. And then the first part of Faith's direct testimony, the second part of the direct testimony, and the cross-exam. Look for a video that I did yesterday which said something like keep the faith or just keep the faith or something like that, and you can get the rest of that information. And then there was the cross-examination for Faith's mother, which was on another video that was titled A Mother's Love. And for those of you who are asking me why do I have these strange titles on my videos, it is because anytime I put Mr. Kelly's name in the title, if I put his name in my keywords, if I talk about him in the description of the video, if I put the video in my playlist, then my video gets flagged. And so I'm just trying, I'm not using keywords anymore. I'm rarely talking about the description, but some videos I do have the description, and then I'm definitely not using his name in the title. And so I just try to come up with these catchy titles to kind of let you guys know what I'm going to be talking about in the video. So that's it for me. As always, go ahead, leave your comments below, rate the video, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. And until the next time, I shall talk to you guys later. Bye-bye.